was always kind of taught to dream big and think like a leader.
How can we hack the system?
We are producers to its core. We're makers.
That was that moment where I was like, yes, like this was a big one to put us on the map.
Creativity is messy. Perfect is boring.
That to me is good creative. That to me is success.
You can see talent in people.
We want to go create the next best brand in the world.
This is who we are and this is what we do.
This is Creatives Offscript. Dirk van Ginkel is a multifaceted blend of creative director and technologist and is the founder of Jam3 Amsterdam, having grown the experience agency's new outpost to over 30 employees within 2 years. With a background in AI, a belief in community, and a passion for world travel, Dirk brings his unique skill set to the table on a daily basis for clients such as Adidas, H&M, and Miro. Welcome to our show, Dirk.
Thanks for having me.
So you've got a very diverse resume, and I want to start by asking, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a kid?
I think it's tricky. So I come from a family in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. And Rotterdam, I mean, a lot of people won't know, is a city which is like, it has one of the biggest ports in the city or in Europe. So overall, everyone where I come from, they all went and worked in the port. And I was actually one of the people who wanted to be creative. So I studied architecture for a bit, and then I ended up in this port, of course, which I hated. So I worked there for 4 years and I learned a lot. And I was a planner on ships, actually, or like the biggest boats in the world. And then I started to do my own work and I really wanted to do more creative work. So I started to design and do personal projects. And that's how I started rolling into this world, because all I knew is I wanted to do something. And that's how I started to reach out to companies. And I actually worked in New York as well. But I kind of rolled into it. I never really knew what I wanted to do, which is, I know, not the right answer, but it did end up that way, I would say.
Well, I know a lot of people don't know what they want to do at a young age or even at an older age. But one thing I noticed is that you did get a master's in artificial intelligence. What drove you to study that?
So I'm always fascinated with technology. When I was working in shipping, I actually taught myself how to develop, because websites were interesting. Back then you had Flash, and I learned myself how to work in Flash. I learned how to do a little bit of WebGL, and that fascination with technology, where it started, moved into design. And I'm a firm believer that any of like what you see in Web3 or anything that you see right now is all rooted in some sort of technology-driven kind of like creativity. So I really back then wanted to learn more about the like AI as a whole, because I think it will be increasingly more important, and creativity can coexist with artificial intelligence. So I'm a firm believer that AI and creativity can coexist. And Midjourney is a good example of this, which is basically an AI where you type in a couple of words and it can spit out any, like the most amazing assets. I have an example now in front of me where someone like typed in like none in the year of 3000 and you get this really surreal image that constantly regenerates. And I think for brands, this might sound as a silly example, but brands, in my view, will become more like curators in the future. So whatever digital behavior you see online, that can directly translate into images, like, and any of the content. So I believe that whatever you do digitally, it can have a creative outing or a creative representation as a whole. And Midjourney is a good example of it.
Interesting. And when you say the brands will be the curators, do you mean that, you know, us as just normal people, creators, like will be creating the content, or AI will be creating the content? Or how does that relationship work?
So to me, at least how brands have been working over the last like 10 years is they have been spitting out content. They've been seeing what audiences like quite decently, but it's a constant stream of content that's just being spit towards you. What you see right now, and there's no real adaptation there in my view. So what I think is more interesting as a whole, and this is what's happening with NFTs as well, is like your audience all of a sudden gets a little bit of a stake in things, but an NFT is a share nowadays. And by being more active and having a little bit of ownership in a brand, what if AI can take a little bit of a play here as well? It's like, as you're typing stuff, as you're being active on Discord, or as you're being active online, can we actually adjust the content live as you're talking to your peers on a Discord, for instance? So I think AI right now it's too early, but imagine that you're recreating worlds, digital worlds, and in a way things are virtualizing anyhow, but you can affect it by your online behavior.
That's interesting. It's like potentially like real-time content creation through the use of AI.
Exactly.
Yeah. Fascinating. How do you think AI changes the industry just in terms of, your traditional creative director, your traditional designer? What is the impact on that?
So the one thing AI is good at is actually capturing what people think at the largest scale. Like a human brain cannot process as much data. I think that's the main big difference. And of course, like a computer doesn't have any empathy and is not a being, I would say. But I think what's interesting is that as these digital, like you see Decentraland, you see Roblox and whatnot as well, I think those are creative expressions, but still made by brands. But overall, I think the big difference is how you as a brand are perceived at a global level. And I think it can be a lot more surreal because humans do think a little bit more in compartmentalized boxes. You have a certain color, you're associated to a certain gender group. And I think a computer can kind of like maybe break out of that a little bit by using large data sets.
Interesting. So it almost kind of expands the human creative director. It expands their potential for creativity. Is that, just trying to wrap my head around, how that would work.
I think, it's an extension of what you're feeding it in a way. Humans are always better at creativity, but it's an extension of the things that you want to feed. So if a brand's audience wants to go left, a computer will be able to understand it a little bit more. But me as a creative director, I can feed it certain content to make it more creative or feed out new outcomes from a content perspective.
Yeah, super interesting. And going a little deeper on AI, since this is, something you've obviously studied, what do you think the future is? Like, how far are we from sentient AI?
It's really, I think we're quite far off, to be honest. I know there's an employee at Google, that said there was sentient AI, but that person got fired. So either that person revealed some secrets, but I'm hoping we're never going to get there, to be honest, because I think it should be an extension of the human mind and it should be a tool that you can use but I think we're far away from it, is my view.
Interesting. So jumping back to your career path, I noticed at the early stages of your career, you bounced around a lot between a lot of different companies. Were you freelancing at that point or just couldn't find a company that was the right fit?
I freelanced in quite a few companies, but I've kind of struggled because I worked as a UX designer, as a creative technologist, and I wanted to find a company which was more on the edge of technology. There's a lot of companies that can do a big build, I think, but there are not a lot of companies who can push tech like, a Unit 9 where I've worked or a Jam3. And that's what I really liked, especially because all of a sudden I could do a lot of pitching. I was constantly flexing my creative muscles to like convince businesses to buy into our work. And I think Jam3 and Unit 9, for that matter, to be honest, kind of provided that support and variety of work.
And so tell everyone exactly what Jam3 does, because I think it's much different than a traditional agency.
Yeah, that's right. So Jam3 is an experience and design company. And what we do is we create forward-thinking experiences for any modern brand. So what that means is we always do work with a little bit of tech involved. So there's always some sort of tech element, but we don't do tech for tech's sake. And what that means is anything within your digital ecosystem we can kind of touch. But how we're different is there are a lot of agencies around that can do concepting, that can do strategy, but they never really know how to execute. And this is where we're a little bit different, because about 5 years ago, we were a production agency that made websites for other agencies, but we shifted that kind of thinking and added our strategy capabilities as well, where we became the thinkers and the makers. So whenever a brand comes to us with a big problem to solve, this is when we get really excited. And this is where we can come up with creative ideas that actually help their business, where we help work on their strategy, but we also help actually producing it. So you get the full suite from start to end there.
Yeah, amazing. And you do amazing work at Jam3, obviously incredible list of clients. What do you think is the secret sauce behind Jam3? Like, is it the culture? Like, what's unique about Jam3 that's enabled you all to be so successful?
I think Jam3 is a people company, and we're only as good as our talent, and we're always straddling the line between finding clients that fit that hunger and that drive that our talent has. But also, it's that hybrid mix. We're not like, a line we always say is to our clients as well. It's like, never trust a person who doesn't know how to build it. We're one of those agencies where when we propose an idea, we're not going to say, oh, we can't do it. Let's go to another agency to figure out whether it's actually feasible. We will figure it out and try and push the boundaries because we have all those people in-house and we know how to, I don't know, make a crazy Web3 experience where we make over 1 million avatars, or create complex land and have a full digital theme park. Those are things you need to kind of like show courage for and have the right talent to do it.
Producers, are you sick of messy projects, outdated calendars, hundreds of email chains, and lost files? Have you dreamed of one tool that can bring your entire production workflow together in one place? Assemble is the project management platform designed by producers for producers, featuring calendars, task lists, call sheets, asset management, and more. Assemble helps industry-leading production companies, agencies, and brands streamline their content production workflow. Try Assemble today using the code Offscript, that's one word, to get your first month free. Learn more at assemble.tv. You are listening to the Creatives Offscript podcast. So you've now been tasked with building the Amsterdam office and have grown it to over 30-person headcount in 2 years. How has that experience been so far?
A lot of fun, I have to say. And I've been lucky enough to have good support from Toronto because we opened it up just before everything went in lockdown, which is a little bit scary. But you learn a lot. It's like going from a creative director to all of a sudden running a business, I would say, is something completely new. And I think I would lie if that's not the case. But what I've been, and again, this is why the people are so important, I think, is I've been lucky enough to hire a couple of really good, talented people that I'm very proud of that really are crucial to building out that culture and building out a little bit of their own identity that pushes clients to move further. Honestly, it's been probably the wildest ride in my professional career. And I've moved around to, 5 countries in 4 years before. But it's been so much fun and it's so rewarding to do.
And Jam3 was recently acquired by Martin Sorrell's S4, and a partnership was born with Media.Monks. We're big fans of Media.Monks. We had Oliver Coolidge, the current Chief Innovation Officer, on our podcast last season. Curious, just how does that symbiosis work between those two companies?
I think, what's nice about Media.Monks, they have the same DNA. They've come from a background of production. They're not, I think WPP is a whole different story. Like it's an old model, in my view, where they propose stuff, they need other partners, and actually a lot of the creative thinking happens, I'm very biased, on our side of the business, or our side, really, where things are being defined and really things are being pushed forward. So far, it's been amazing because we are now an 8,000 people powerhouse that all of a sudden has all these different skills that allows us to grow and learn every day. We have an internal film house now all of a sudden. We have a sustainability team. You name it, and it's there essentially. We're learning every day. We're learning something new about the business, which is very excited, to be honest. And it's allowing us to grow as the Amsterdam team as well. And I think that the one thing about a merger, which is the most important, is understanding that your own culture is very important and figuring out ways to make these cultures blend over time, but not rush it. Because departments exist for a reason, even if it's within a larger company. And departments all have their own culture a little bit as well.
And when you mentioned that you have your own internal film department, is that in reference to Media.Monks, or is Jam3 also developing their own internal film department as well?
This will be in reference to Media.Monks because we're part of Media.Monks.
Yeah, and it just seems like such a cool blend of the experience, the technology, the design elements with their production and their expertise. I know that they also dabble in technology as well. I can only imagine like the sort of things that are going to be dreamed up out of this partnership or already have. So it seems like a super exciting future.
Yeah. I think the team is very excited as well. It's like so many new tools and so much to learn every day. It's great. It's been a great thing so far.
And so I know you're a strong believer in culture and community. Tell me why this is so important and how this informs your creative perspective.
Well, we've been working with Adidas in Amsterdam now for about 2 years as well, and a lot of other brands, but using Adidas as an example. What they've achieved as a brand, and a lot of the larger sportswear brands, is they have such a strong community around them that they can do a lot more things without real media spend. If you had back in, 5-6 years ago, I used to do shoe drops in LA for Adidas, and without spending any media and just doing an event, people would line up for hours. And I think if you can assure that your brand has a strong community that's driven to invest their time into it, you can have so much fun. And this is what Adidas has been doing for so many years. And they've been reinventing themselves over and over again. But they've always found ways to be interesting and do something new for the community and give back and create value. So in my view, whenever there is a brand that we talk to that has that community-driven kind of like sway, I personally always get very excited because that's when you can do the newest kind of tech things, because that's where a lot of investment goes instead of big media spend.
Yeah. And it's great that, you're working with a brand like that does have such brand cachet and this huge community and following, really. But let's say you're working with an up and coming brand. How are you going to help them build a community?
I think this is where our strategy skills come in. I mean, in Amsterdam, we have a really strong team and also globally as well. But what we do is we generally do a longer strategy sprint where we do some ethnographic research. We do some bigger thinking in terms of what their pain points are or what they like as well. Then from there, we tend to do like a larger sprint. Sometimes we do innovation sprints, and an innovation sprint ideating on those pain points and figure out how we can bring back value and give them a good ground to keep building on. So it can be a brand platform, it can be a digital platform, but overall it's a series of events that need to happen towards a North Star.
Yeah.
And the North Star is why that strategy sprint in the upfront is so important, because you always need to work to something.
What do you find working best for building communities? I mean, is it activations? Is it events? Is it giveaways? Is it things like that? Or is it the brand actually, creating their own community that they own, right? Like their own, whether it's Discord, whether it's something like that. I mean, I'm just curious, like where you're seeing the trends in terms of community building, because it's such a hot topic these days.
I think, to be honest, it starts all with your brand. There are a lot of brands who do greenwashing, or there are a lot of brands that have a certain positioning and say, but if they don't deliver on it, nothing even matters. And I think once that brand positioning is strong and well established, it's a matter of delivering on them and finding the right channels to be vocal. If you're, if you're a fashion brand, it's probably more interesting to be on Discord and deliver on your promises every time, because it's all about delivering on promises and figuring out how you can readjust those promises in the future.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, it sounds like connecting with people over things they really care about, the values, as you mentioned, versus just selling them a product.
Yeah, exactly. Because the product is important, but it needs to align to a certain North Star, I always think. And that's why, like, now, if you look at Gen A or Gen Z compared to millennials, they are so driven by emotionally driven by, are you green? Are you respecting your neighbors or your friends, or like anything to do around gender? It's so driven around values, and that will only grow. And I think millennials are already making a stronger stance, but I think as the generations like grow up and become of more relevance, you can see that this trend, as soon as you don't deliver on it, they'll like turn you down. On Discord, when you look at any of the Web3 work as well, as soon as you don't deliver on it, you don't exist right away. So I think as long as you have a strong proposition, and if you manage to reinvent yourself over time by making promises on how you want to improve, I think you can get really far in this day and age.
Yeah. I mean, the big one that comes to mind when you start talking about that for me was Nike with the Colin Kaepernick campaign. I mean, it was such a lightning rod, and it was so polarizing at the time, especially, and it created such a polarized response, but it was obviously a strategic decision by them. And you could think that the people that endeared themselves to that cause, I mean, the value, the pull, and the community around Nike for those people, I mean, was just incredibly strengthened, I'm sure. Just one example that comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no brand that has done it as good as Nike, to be honest. There are too many smaller promises, but at that moment, at that time, taking that risk, I thought it was amazing. It was one of the best pieces in the last couple of years, in my view.
Yeah, it was bold, definitely bold. And so one of your mottos is that the future is coming at us fast. Tell me more about this and why you think that we need to act now to keep up.
Yeah, the future is coming faster at us every day. I think a lot of brands, and I think I'm in Europe, a lot of brands they haven't really, what you see right now with car brands, for instance, Tesla came around and kind of rethought like how cars should drive. It's like a whole different approach. You see a lot of brands globally struggling with these new brands who are a lot more agile. And I think digital can play a role in this by taking older brands like the hotel chains or whatnot and make them a lot more innovative and a lot more accessible. So in my view, there's so many categories where we can play and make them more innovative. Like, why not launch a car brand that doesn't have any dealerships? Why not launch a car brand where ownership is not even a thing? I think Lynk & Co. has done this as well. Are you familiar with Lynk & Co. at all?
I'm not. I don't believe so.
So business models can change, is my view. So Lynk & Co. is a new car brand, which is actually made by Volvo. And what they had done is they had an insight, which basically said about 90%, about a car is in standstill about 90% of the time. Why not use that and create an app where you can get a car, you spend 500 euros a month, but you can actually put that car online with your app, almost like Uber. And if I want to take that car, I can take that car from you. And the longer I have it, it reduces your monthly costs. It's been really popular in the Netherlands and all over Europe. But I think digital is crucial to this. And it's very much focused in service design. But I think campaigns can be a little bit like play in service design as well to create value and change the way we think about our regular car use, for instance. And I think there's so many instances where you find the right insight. You can apply that to your brands as well.
Yeah, and I think Tesla, that's one of their goals as well, is that shared ownership model. So super interesting stuff. Getting back to the future, we obviously had this huge market crash recently. And just curious, are you still long on NFTs?
We do quite a bit of Web3 work. And I do think, sure, there's a crash, but I think everything has been crashing, to be honest. So if there's less money, like fiat money, as they would say, or liquidity around, it will happen everywhere, in my view. Personally, I think there is a future there, but the most important thing is make it accessible to everyone and ensure that it's secure. Right now, for other, ethically, or I think it's not accessible to most people. Right now, it's mostly for people who are well off and who have disposable money and who can lose money and who are well educated. So if you're not well educated, it's an easy way to lose everything. As soon as those things are resolved, I think there will be a brighter future for it.
So more democratizing access to NFTs, you think, is the key?
Correct.
Got it. And should every brand be creating an NFT, or is that just kind of diluting what makes them so cool to begin with?
I think every brand needs to understand why they want to use them. I think there's no brand in the world that's going to be successful if they launch one NFT without a thought on where they want to take it next. Every NFT can have utility, and with utility, I mean you buy an NFT and it gives you access to other things. Or is it so you can be like the Bored Ape Club, be part of a club? And I think H&M is completely different to Adidas. Adidas is all about creating like actual value. If you resell it, you get money back. Whereas H&M, it has a completely different audience where not everyone wants to spend $700 or $800 for an NFT. So what would be the offering for H&M? Overall, I think everyone should play a role in Web3 because it is a new form of digital transformation and it will have a future. What it will look like is the question. I think for now, the adoption, and like I said, the adoption needs to adjust. But every brand should dip their toes in it somehow because there will be ways to use it. And at least you have the knowledge in-house then once mass adoption is there.
Yeah. It's kind of like Web 1.0. Everybody was like, does every company need a website someday? You know, maybe now we'll be looking back in this 10, 20 years ago and laughing when we thought, you know, does every brand need an NFT or does every brand need to be on the blockchain?
Exactly. Yeah. But there's also soul-bound NFTs. It's like, imagine you get an NFT and you cannot resell it. I don't know. There's something interesting there. It's like as soon as when you're active for a brand as well, I mean, you can give a passport, which is soul-bound as well, because there's only one Nate Watkins or one Dirk van Ginkel. But imagine doing something like that as well from a brand perspective, where you've been around with the brand, you've invested in the brand, and you get something back, but it's only for you. I think there's so much fun, and this is not even rolled out yet, but there's something new happening every other week, and brands can kind of learn and utilize that and give that to people as well, give back as a whole.
And so going back to your personal life, traveling seems to be a passion of yours. Let's say another pandemic rolls around, you've got to camp out and work remote somewhere for 6 months. Where are you going?
I don't know. I'd probably stay in Europe. What I really enjoy here is like if I go an hour south, I'm in Belgium and it's different. And if I go 2 hours, I'm in Paris. And if I fly 5 hours, I'm in Portugal. Portugal is probably the place I would end up at. Like there's good internet, good food, and a big creative community as well. Lisbon has been growing so much with amazing talent that I would probably want to try and stay there for a little bit.
Nice. I haven't been, but I will definitely put it high on the list after that recommendation.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like good food, beaches.
Definitely.
You have it all there.
Yeah. I speak a bit of Portuguese as well, so I think I could get by pretty good there. Some other questions. What's the most influential book you've ever read or film that you've ever seen?
Well, you were talking about travel, but Into the Wild was always my favorite movie. I don't know, I find it so interesting. I think at the end, it's not smart what he did, of course. But are you familiar with the film?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's quite old by now, but this was, I think, before I moved abroad. And I always thought it was so fascinating that one person could just leave and explore the world. And back then I always wanted to move abroad. I wanted to move to New York, which I did. And then I never really wanted to go back to the Netherlands. And that was one of those movies where I could kind of understand what the kid was doing, but I could not understand why he did it alone.
Yeah, great movie, and definitely sounds like it inspired some of your life in terms of the traveling. And so beyond travel and AI and Web3, what's something that you're really passionate about?
Well, on a work perspective, to be honest, what I'm the most passionate about right now is forming a team and creating, finding a balance, how to keep a client happy and building a team. And I know this is a little cliche, but as a creative director, I thought I knew what that was, but now running this office has opened my eyes as to how you can create a dynamic within a team that fits with clients and builds it up. Honestly, it's a big passion work because I really love my work. But outside of that, I'm a big soccer fan and I hang out with my friends. I just got married, been together with my wife now for 14 years. So we do a lot of fun things together and travel around Europe.
Sounds amazing. And looking back, what advice would you give to a 20-year-old you?
Explore places that you would not expect to start at. Like, I think when I wanted to go to New York, or when I went to New York, I actually applied at about 300 places, I think. And I was like, I didn't know what I was doing, I'll be very honest. But there was one place that kind of got me hooked. I had a lot of chats with different people, but don't be too narrow. Like, it's all about finding your passion or like showing your passion to people, and you can get quite far. And I've been lucky enough to always find good mentors. At every company, there was always one person that got me further. And I think that's the thing, is like, you need to find a person who sees it in you and really wants to push you and try and capitalize on that. And I've been lucky enough to have those people around where I actually got further. And as you said earlier, I've moved around quite a lot, but at Unit 9, I've found a really good coach where I learned so much. So I was looking for a good coach, and that's what you should latch on to. Like, find that one person that's really going to get you further.
Yeah, great advice. Well, thank you so much for joining. Love chatting technology in the future. So I really enjoyed this and appreciate your time, Dirk.
Thanks so much.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and comment to help us spread the word. You can also find more insider content on the Assemble blog, and you can find me on all channels at Nate Watkin. And don't forget, if your producing team is in need of a project management solution, try Assemble today to streamline your production workflow. Our listeners received their first month free by utilizing the code Offscript, that's one word, at checkout. You have been listening to the Creatives Offscript podcast hosted by Assemble.